She stood in the soft evening light, barefoot on the balcony, one hand wrapped around a glass of white wine, the other brushing loose strands of hair behind her ear. I watched her from the kitchen doorway, the warm scent of rosemary and lemon lingering in the air. She didn't know I was there yet. Or maybe she did. Her robe slipped slightly off one shoulder, and she didn't fix it. Instead, she just leaned forward against the railing, quiet, thoughtful, like she was waiting for someone to stop pretending we were just friends. My name is Noah. I'm 26. I work freelance, design, mostly. Logos, websites, ad layouts. Nothing glamorous, but enough to pay rent on my studio apartment and keep the fridge stocked. I live on the third floor of an old building downtown, the kind where the walls are thin, the elevators creak, and everyone knows everyone by the sound of their footsteps more than their names. I've always kept to myself. Not antisocial, exactly, just content with silence. There's a strange comfort in predictable days, coffee in the morning, emails in the afternoon, leftovers by 8. No real surprises, no real losses. Until she moved in. I first saw her on a Tuesday. She was carrying a box labeled kitchen and swearing under her breath because the elevator was stuck. Again. I offered to help without thinking, and she laughed, not a forced kind of laugh, but dry, amused, like she'd already decided the building was going to be a disaster. Her name was Elise. She was older, that much was obvious. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Not that I cared. She had this composure about her, like she'd already been through the storm and knew it wasn't worth flinching anymore. Her hair was dark and tied back loosely, her lips full and bare of makeup, and she wore a long black dress like it was the only thing in her closet that made sense. We didn't talk much that day, just enough for me to learn she'd moved from the East Coast, was renting the unit across from mine, and liked her coffee strong and silent. She thanked me for the help with a nod, said, "See you around," and disappeared behind her door. That night, I found myself listening for the sound of her footsteps. It wasn't long before we settled into a rhythm, the kind that forms quietly between neighbors who don't talk often but share the same hallway air. I'd hear her boots click across the floor in the morning as I opened my laptop. Her keys jingled faintly when she came home past 9. And sometimes, when I took the trash out or passed her in the stairwell, she'd give me a smile. Quick, faint, but real. She never brought anyone over. No loud voices, no music leaking under the door. Just her, moving through the world with a kind of grace I couldn't stop noticing. A few weeks in, she knocked on my door. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was in sweatpants, half asleep from editing photos all night. "Hey," she said, holding out a Tupperware container. "I made too much soup." I blinked at her, probably looking like I'd just been yanked out of a coma. "Oh, thank you," I said, taking it from her. Our fingers brushed for the briefest second. "It's nothing," she said. "You looked tired yesterday." I wanted to ask how she knew that. I didn't. Instead, I mumbled something about work and deadlines, and she just gave a small nod before turning away. That night, I sat on the edge of my couch, eating her soup, something rich and slow-cooked, with rosemary and chickpeas, and wondered what kind of woman makes soup for a man she barely knows. The next morning, there was a sticky note on my door. "Let me know if you need more. E." I kept the note. Still have it tucked inside the notebook I use for sketching. From then on, she'd knock every now and then. Sometimes with leftovers, sometimes just a bottle of wine and a question like, "Do you know how to fix a loose drawer?" Or, "Is your hot water as moody as mine?" Each time, I'd pretend not to notice how close she stood, how her perfume lingered, how she'd laugh a little longer if I looked tired. There was nothing flirtatious about it, not overtly, but it wasn't casual either. And slowly, the silence between us became something I didn't want to fill. Something that started to feel like the beginning of a question neither of us knew how to ask. It was late April when we really started talking. She caught me on the stairs one evening, both of us carrying bags from the same corner market. It started with a laugh about the price of lemons, spiraled into a conversation about the difference between East Coast and West Coast bread, somehow, and ended with her standing just outside my door while I struggled to find my keys. "Come in," I offered, not thinking. She paused, just for a second. Then she nodded. It was the first time Elise stepped into my apartment. She moved slowly, like someone used to measuring their steps. Her eyes scanned the space, the open sketchbooks, the unwashed mugs, the quiet music humming from the Bluetooth speaker, and she didn't flinch. She set her bag on the counter, pulled out a bottle of wine, and said, "You got glasses?" I did. We didn't sit close, not at first. She took the armchair. I took the end of the couch. We talked about music, mostly. How she missed jazz clubs that stayed open until 3. How she used to play the piano but hadn't touched one in years. Her voice softened when she said that, like she missed something she didn't want to admit she missed. "You still draw?" she asked, nodding toward the sketch pad on the table. "Yeah," I said. "Mostly faces. People I see or imagine." "Can I see?" It took a beat longer than it should have to answer. "Sure." I handed her the pad. She flipped through slowly, her expression unreadable. I watched her fingers as she turned each page. Watched how her thumb rested lightly against the edge, how she paused on one drawing, a woman sitting in a chair, her face half in shadow. "This one," she said. "She looks like she's waiting for someone." She was. Elise looked up then, and our eyes met. There was nothing suggestive in it, just stillness. Recognition. "You draw women well," she said. "You don't overdo them." "Maybe I'm scared to." Her laugh was quiet. "Scared of what?" I shook my head, not answering. She left an hour later. I didn't walk her to the door. She knew the way. But when she stepped out into the hall, she hesitated. I heard her turn back, then knock, softly. When I opened it again, she said, "Next time, you make dinner." And just like that, there was a next time. That Friday, I cleaned more than I needed to. Set the table. Lit a candle I found buried under receipts and pins. I cooked pasta, overcooked, a little too salty, but she smiled like it was the best meal she'd had in weeks. "Don't get used to it," I joked. "I wasn't planning to," she said, sipping her wine. "But I might surprise you." We didn't touch. Not once. Not even a hand on the back as she walked past. But the space between us felt smaller. The air thicker. Like something was slowly being built, not rushed, not obvious, but there. Later that night, she helped me dry the dishes. Our fingers brushed once, her pinky against mine, warm, steady, and neither of us pulled away. "I should go," she said. "Okay." But she didn't move right away. Just stood there, one hand resting on the counter, her profile lit soft by the glow of the stovetop light. Her eyes didn't meet mine, but her voice was quiet when she finally spoke. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you." This time, when she turned to leave, she didn't pause. But I stood at the window and watched her cross the hallway. She looked back, once, just once, and smiled. The next few weeks slipped by in soft, unspoken rhythm. She never stayed long, never crossed any lines, but she kept coming back. Sometimes with food, a homemade tart, a plate of roasted vegetables, once even an entire roasted chicken she claimed was too much for one person anyway. Other times, she'd show up empty-handed but full of questions. About my art, my childhood, the kind of music I listened to when I worked. She asked like she actually wanted to know. And I answered. Every time. It wasn't flirtation. Not the kind you see in movies. There were no giggles or drawn-out glances. But there was intimacy in the quiet. In the way she let herself lean on my counter, barefoot, sipping tea she didn't ask permission to make. In the way she never touched me, never once, but moved through my apartment like she belonged in it. One night, it rained. Hard. She knocked on my door around 9, soaked to the skin in a loose gray sweater and jeans that stuck to her calves. Her hair was plastered to her forehead, and she was laughing, a real laugh, bright and unexpected. "I didn't bring an umbrella," she said, standing in the hallway, dripping. "Come in." She peeled off her shoes, left a puddle on the floor, and walked barefoot into the living room. I handed her a towel. She dried her hair roughly, then sat on the couch with her legs curled beneath her. "You ever feel like everything is on pause?" she asked, not looking at me. "Like you're just floating through your life, waiting for something to matter again?" I sat down in the chair across from her. "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes." She looked up, eyes darker than usual in the low light. "Before I moved here," she said, "I was married. 10 years. Left him last fall." I didn't say anything. Just waited. "He was decent," she said. "Not cruel. Just cold. Like he stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as furniture." Her voice didn't waver. If anything, it was steadier than before. Like she'd said the words out loud enough times to take the edge off them. "I spent so long trying to be something for him," she went on, "that I forgot what I was for myself. And when I remembered, really remembered, it was already too late to fix it." She glanced at me, expression unreadable. "You're young, Noah. Do you think I'm pathetic for telling you this?" "No," I said, without hesitation. "I think you're brave." A beat passed, then another. The rain hit the windows harder now, and somewhere down the hallway, a pipe clicked in the wall. She smiled. Soft, almost grateful. "You know," she said, When I first saw you, the day you helped with the box, I thought, he's quiet. He's careful. He's watching everything. I chuckled. I get that a lot. It's not a bad thing, she said. Most men talk too much and see too little. She stood then, walked slowly toward the kitchen to warm her hands over the stove. I followed, leaning against the fridge. Do you miss him? I asked. She didn't answer right away, just stood there, palms hovering over the burner. No, she said finally, but I miss who I was supposed to be with him. The air between us changed. Not thicker, not charged, just heavier, more honest. We stayed like that for a long time, her warming her hands, me watching her breathe. When she finally turned back, her eyes landed on mine. You should sleep, she said gently. You too. I walked her to the door. She looked up at me, eyes searching, maybe waiting for something, a signal, a line, anything. But I didn't move. Neither did she. She just gave me a tired smile and said, "Good night, Noah," and walked away. The door shut with a soft click. But that night, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. June came early that year. The kind of warmth that makes the sidewalk smell like sunburned concrete and soft fruit. The air felt slower, stretched out. Even the hours seemed to linger longer than usual. I started keeping my door open while I worked. Not wide, just ajar. Enough to hear her footsteps in the hall. Enough to let her know I was here, and maybe that I wanted her to be too. Some days she'd appear without knocking. Just a soft push of the door and her voice calling, "Hey." Other times, she'd text first. "You busy?" Or, "Can I borrow some sugar?" Not a metaphor, promise. We had a rhythm now, a private kind of ritual. She told me she used to paint. Not professionally, not even well, she claimed, but enough to feel like her thoughts had somewhere to go. One afternoon, I pulled out an extra canvas I hadn't touched in months and left it out on the kitchen table, alongside some half-dried tubes of gouache. That night, she sat beside me in the living room, the canvas between us, and didn't speak for almost an hour. Just painted, slow, careful strokes, her brow furrowed, her fingers smudged with deep blue and rust. When she was done, she leaned back and let out a breath. The painting wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It was a small doorway in a garden wall, almost hidden behind vines. A secret, maybe. I didn't know I missed it until now, she said softly. Thank you. I didn't tell her what I was thinking. That watching her paint was the most beautiful thing I'd seen in months. That the way her fingers moved across the brush said more than any compliment ever could. Instead, I just said, "You're welcome." And she smiled. Then came the night everything almost tipped. She'd come over late, after a day of errands, she said, after a long phone call with her sister back in Boston. She looked tired and softer somehow, less composed, like she'd loosened something that had been wound tight for too long. We sat on the floor this time, backs against the couch, sipping tea. A slow song played in the background, something old and crackling from a record she brought over once and left behind. I used to love dancing, she said suddenly. I glanced at her. Ballroom. She shook her head. No, just in the kitchen, with bare feet and bad posture. I smiled. You still can. She looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time, I felt something stir between us. Something neither of us had named, but both of us had nurtured in silence. I don't know what this is, she said quietly. Whatever we're doing. I don't know if it's kind or foolish. It's both, I said. Maybe that's why it matters. The words surprised me. Not because they were untrue, but because I hadn't meant to say them out loud. She didn't speak, just stared at her mug, thumb tracing the rim slowly. Then she shifted, turned toward me. Her knee brushed mine, and it stayed there. That was the closest we ever came to touching, really touching. Her breath caught for a second. Mine did too. And in that space between us, I felt something settle. Not desire, not exactly, but a kind of ache. A recognition. The feeling of wanting something you're not sure you're allowed to want. Eventually, she stood. I should go, she said. I nodded. Okay. At the door, she hesitated. Her voice was soft when she spoke again. Do you ever wish we'd met at a different time? I didn't answer right away. Just looked at her. The way her hair framed her face. The line of her collarbone disappearing into the neckline of her loose white tee. I think, I said slowly, if we'd met at a different time, we wouldn't have seen each other the same way. She nodded. That smile again. Small. Unsteady. Then she left. And all night, I lay awake wondering what might have happened if I'd reached for her hand. She didn't come by for 4 days. That had never happened before, not since this thing between us had quietly begun to unfurl. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People get busy. Life interferes. But as the days passed, a weight settled into my chest, slow and steady, like water filling a basin. I didn't text. I didn't want to seem needy. Or worse, presumptuous. But by Thursday night, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I wrote a message, deleted it, then wrote it again, shorter this time. "You okay?" It sat on the screen for a minute before I hit send. She replied an hour later. "I'm fine. Just needed some space." 3 days ago, that would have been enough. But tonight, it felt like a door gently shutting. I left my apartment once the sun went down. Walked the block twice. No destination, just movement. When I came back, her lights were off. The next morning, she knocked. She didn't wait for me to speak, just walked past me into the apartment like she had every right to. She was wearing a navy sweatshirt and leggings, hair tied back, no makeup. She looked tired. Hello. She stood in the middle of my living room, arms crossed, not looking at me. "I needed to clear my head," she said. I didn't push, just nodded. She took a breath. "I had coffee with someone yesterday," she said. "Someone from before? Not my ex-husband, someone else. A man I used to know, before all of it." I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my voice steady. "Okay. It wasn't a date," she added quickly. "Not really. But it felt like I was trying to remember a version of myself I don't think exists anymore." She finally looked at me then. I wanted it to feel like something, but it didn't. It just felt like pretending. We stood in silence for a long moment. Her eyes were glassy, but she didn't cry. "You scare me, Noah," she said. That threw me. "I scare you?" "Yes, because you see me. You don't try to fix me or explain me away. And that's harder than anything else right now." I stepped closer, slow and careful. "I'm not here to fix you," I said. "I don't want to. I just want you as you are." She exhaled shakily. That's the part one don't know how to handle. I reached out then, not to touch her, not yet, just to close the distance. I stood inches away. Her breath mingled with mine. "You don't have to handle it," I whispered. "You just have to let it be what it is." She closed her eyes, tilted her head forward, resting it lightly against my shoulder. Her hands didn't move. Her body didn't lean in. But her forehead, that small point of contact, was enough to undo something in me I hadn't even realized I was holding tight. We stood there like that. Two people, unmoving, in a space small enough to hold something fragile. When she finally stepped back, she looked lighter. Not fixed, just less guarded. "I'm not sure what happens next," she said. "Me either. But I don't want to disappear again." "Then don't." That night, we didn't talk much. She stayed for tea, curled up on the couch under my blanket. We watched a movie she'd already seen and I couldn't follow. Her foot brushed mine halfway through and didn't move. When she left, it wasn't with a goodbye. It was with a quiet, simple, "Tomorrow?" And I said, "Yeah, tomorrow." The days that followed were quieter, but not distant. She came over often, sometimes just to sit near me while I worked, reading with her feet tucked beneath her on the couch, or drinking coffee in silence as sunlight filled the room. It was like we'd reached an understanding, though we never said it out loud. She never stayed the night, never crossed that line. But there was an intimacy in our stillness, in the way she let her shoulder rest against mine when we watched something, or the way our hands would brush near the coffee pot in the morning. Little accidents that didn't feel accidental anymore. Then came the evening I'll always remember, not for what happened, but for what didn't. I'd made us dinner again. Something simple, garlic roasted chicken and soft bread. She wore a soft gray sweater, hair loose, no jewelry except a small silver ring on her thumb. I remember that clearly. We ate by the window, and afterward, she helped me clean. We moved around each other like we'd done it 100 times before. When we finished, we didn't go to the couch. We stayed by the sink. She leaned against the counter, looked at me. Her eyes were calm, but there was something behind them tonight. Something held back. Her fingers toyed with the ring on her thumb. "I keep trying to find the language for this," she said. I waited. "I'm not in a place to fall in love," she said. "Not yet. Maybe not for a while." I nodded. "Okay. But I think about you. All the time. In ways I haven't let myself think about anyone in a long time." She looked down at the floor, then back at me. "And sometimes," she continued, "I feel like you showed up in my life right when I was learning how to breathe again." I stepped forward. Slowly. She didn't move away. I reached up and gently touched her face, just the back of my hand against her cheek. Her eyes fluttered closed. And then, quietly, she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't long. It wasn't rushed. Just lips touching, barely moving. A whisper of a kiss. One that said, I feel this too, but I'm still trying to figure out what it means. When we pulled apart, she stayed close. I'm scared of ruining this, she said. You're not. I'm older. I've lived more. Lost more. I know. And still, you're here. I'm here. She let out a soft breath, resting her forehead against mine. Her hands moved up to my shoulders, not pulling me in, just holding gently. I'm not asking for anything, I said. Not now. Not yet. Just don't disappear. She nodded against me. I won't. That night, she stayed until midnight. We didn't kiss again. Didn't sleep together. She curled up beside me on the couch, her head against my chest, our legs tangled under a blanket. We said nothing. Just listened to each other breathe. When she left, she kissed me once more on the cheek this time and whispered, "Good night." She walked across the hall, turned once to look at me, then disappeared into her apartment. It's been 2 weeks since then. We still haven't defined it. We still take things slow. Some nights she stays over. Some nights she needs space. I don't push. I think part of love is letting someone feel safe again. Letting them arrive at you when they're ready, not when you are. What we have is quiet, gentle, uncertain, but it's real. And for now, that's enough.